inversion and eversion, it's typically going to be easier to use a goniometer that is slightly flexible. So this is measuring kind of global ankle inversion and eversion. We'll also be measuring more specific subtalar inversion and eversion. But for the more global measurement here, a flexible goniometer is helpful so that you can bend it along your bony landmarks. So the landmarks for inversion, eversion are in the midline of right between the lateral and medial malleolus is where the fulcrum goes. You align the stable arm up the anterior shin with your landmark being the tibial tuberosity. And then the moving arm is in line with the second metatarsal. So the second metatarsal. Okay, so let's get this lined up. So we have tibial tuberosity, midline, and second metatarsal. And if I move him into inversion, okay. So you can see because it's a flexible goniometer, it's just kind of nice to be able to keep it stable on the landmarks versus something that's more stiff. It's going to be much more challenging to take that measurement. And then he measured at about 32 degrees of inversion. So with inversion testing, you are going to be taking the patient into slight plantar flexion and inversion. So plantar flexion, inversion. Versus when you measure dorsiflexion, you're going to be coupling it with, with eversion, you're going to be coupling it with dorsiflexion. So dorsiflexion, eversion. And then you're lining it up with the same landmarks. So in between the malleoli, up to the tibial tuberosity, and the second metatarsal. And then again, dorsiflexion, eversion. And typically there's less eversion range of motion than inversion. And yeah, he's about 8 degrees of eversion. Okay, and let's see. I want to show you guys one more because we'll just finish up the lower extremity. Oh, the subtalar. Let's do subtalar. So lay on your stomach. And have them lay prone with their feet hanging off the edge of the table. Oh yeah, thanks Xavier. Okay, so to measure subtalar inversion, eversion, we're going to be stabilizing on the medial and lateral malleolus, so you're kind of cupping that distal part of the lower leg. And your hand placement should be on the calcaneus, and you're going to be moving the calcaneus into inversion and eversion to get a better sense for how the rear foot moves versus that more global look of the plantar flexion inversion and dorsiflexion eversion. Okay, so to measure this one, again, we go a midline between the medial and lateral malleolus. And you're just going to try to line up the stable arm with the midline of the calf. So there's no bony landmark up here to reference, it's just the midline of the calf. And then the midline of the calcaneus is where your distal arm is going to be aligned. And then from there, again, you can kind of cup around the goniometer and go into inversion. Okay, so I get about 20 degrees. And then eversion, again, typically there's less eversion, rear foot eversion range. And he has about 6 degrees there. Okay. And both of these should be firm end feels, typically. Some people might have a hard end feel if you test for the rear foot eversion because of the contact of the malleolus with the talus. So some people it might actually be more of a hard end feel, but get a sense for what your partner's feels like so that you can start to differentiate firm versus hard versus soft. All right. We're going to do one more because we're only going to do one more here today, so why not just finish up with big toe extension. There are other toe range of motion measurements. I'm going to have you guys reference Physio U for those. Again, because they're pretty straightforward, but first MTP extension is a really important one, like we talked about in the beginning, right? For gait and for kind of elevating onto the balls of the feet, we need about 60 degrees of first ray extension. So to be able to measure this is an important one in the clinic. So optimally, we would use one of these smaller guys to measure. Oh, thank you. Do you mind hitting going forwards on the PowerPoint to your figure?
Forward like this?
Yeah. Right there. Okay, good. And then just scroll to the side a little bit. I just want to show the alignment of it. Yeah. Okay, so for first MTP extension, you're going to be stabilizing the distal metatarsal, and you're going to be moving the phalanx into extension. Okay. So just get a sense for how that joint moves first. Apply some overpressure. Typically, this is going to feel firm. Again, you might feel like there's a firmness that yields more, that might indicate more muscle or fascia tightness, versus a end feel that is non-yielding, that would be more capsular. So you get to that end range, you try to press, and it's not really moving so much. So for him, I feel like it's a little bit more of a capsular sort of end feel. So then from there, with your goniometer, you can take the fulcrum, and you're going to put it on the dorsum of the actual joint, the NTP joint. Align it with that first metatarsal. And then, so midline of the first metatarsal and midline of the proximal phalanx. And then you're going to take them into extension from there. Okay. All right. So he has 68 degrees, which is great. 70 is what's considered optimal. So 70 degrees is optimal.